property taxes, property taxes, property taxes. Let's talk property taxes. Now, I did have a podcast not too long ago where I talked about having the record for the largest number of tax assessment appeals that the city assessor has ever heard. All in a row. You know, I had, I don't know, 27, 20, I don't know, 30 properties, something like that. But so I'm not going to go over that. I've already had that conversation. I've already done that podcast. But one thing I want you to understand that I didn't mention on that podcast that you need to be thinking of in terms of any communities you own right now, if you're a multifamily owner, or if you're looking at purchasing an apartment community. So I'll give you a quick example. So one of my partnerships is looking at purchasing a 200-unit property. Right now, as it stands, the property taxes on this are $344,000 a year. Okay? And I'm not arguing whether that's good or bad, but that's just where it is now. $344,000. If we buy this property where I think we're going to be buying it, it will be at a price that is quite a bit higher than what the current assessed valuation is. Okay? So what does that mean? What that means is now the assessor has a real good reason to raise your taxes. So if the assessed value is $12 million, for example, and you're paying $17 million for the property, guess what? They can go right up to $17 million on their next assessment. And your taxes go, well, I figured out, from $300-some thousand to $430,000. So what I figured out is, if we buy this property at the higher price, our property taxes in 1 year could increase $100,000. I want you to think about that for a second. Versus what's being paid now. Okay? So when you're doing your due diligence, you're working on your numbers, do you work on them saying to yourself, gee, I hope they don't raise the taxes that much, or I bet you they'll just do it in small increments. They won't raise it all the way up to assessed value. They'll just do a little at a time, a little at a time, a little at a time. Right. Now, it used to be the case that would happen. So one of the main reasons I appealed, so many property tax assessments is they took a huge jump. I mean, 24+% on average. And usually, the assessors have been chunking it. You know, we're going to go 10% this year, 5% this year, you know, and so they've been chunking it a little bit more. But that is now out the window, folks. That's now out the window. There continues to be, especially with the aftermath of COVID, there's stresses on budgets. There's stresses. So budgets need to tax to continue to spend. Okay? So what that means is you will need to factor in pro formas, what you currently own, where those sale prices and those comps are coming in at, where your taxes are going to go. And it doesn't matter how low they are. I'm going to give you an example. There's a property here in Cedar Rapids that was on the market, 328 units. I made an offer on that property at a price, okay, so 328 units, and an important piece of this information is the assessed value was $11 million for this 328 unit property, $11 million. So I made an offer on the property, factoring in that those taxes would go up to what my offer was. By the way, it was more than 11 million. It was like 18. Okay, so I made an offer of $18 million, but baked in there was considering how much those taxes would go up from 11 million to $18 million. It was significant. It was like $100-some thousand. Okay, but you got to factor that in. Because most people would say, oh, they won't raise it that much. So let me tell you what happens. So I make my offer for $18 million. The broker on the phone says to me, hey, guess what? We got 4 offers over 20 million. I'm like, 4 offers? How's that possible? We got 4 offers over 20 million. Are you in? I say, no, not at that price. Boom, done. The property sells for $22 million, double the assessed value. Guess what? Guess what those owners of that property got in the mail a month ago? That's right, their new assessment at $22 million. So here's what happened. So their property taxes have just doubled. So think about, you're working on your budget, your pro forma. When we take over, here's what we're going to do. Are you really factoring in that your property taxes will double? No. But should you know that that's going to be the case? You better know. Think about that. Not only do you pay a super high price for the property, oh, by the way, we're going to double your taxes too. Right? So, be smart. Look at what the assessed values are versus what you're paying, and factor in that those values go right up to what you're paying for it, and factor that into your budgets. Worst case scenario is it doesn't go that high. Then it's great. But best case scenario is it doesn't go that high and it's great. Worst case scenario is it gets up to that point, but you've already planned for it.